And so I know that like, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of our special editions of Extra Connections called Race Talk. I'm James Lott Jr. of JLJ Media. I'm the JLJ of JLJ Media. And my voice is in and out today because I guess because of the weather or because it just says it's tired of talking. But I am here and welcome. Oh, I gotta get to me. And my friend here, my co-host, who is finding the channel, finding whatever's going on, the chat's now, is Jared Karol.
Hi, the technologically unsavvy Jared Karol trying to. I want to follow the chat this time just to see what's going on.
See what happens. Now, watch nobody being there this time. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Like every time somebody's in there, there's always one in there. And this time, I know, but it's fine. But yes, there's a chat, you guys, of course. And I'm setting that all up right now. I am pushing some buttons. Here are my church announcements, of course. This is a safe space conversation. Everybody can talk. Jared and I, we talk about everything. If you're in the chat room also, just ask for no name calling or any other crazy shenanigans. I will kick you out as well. But everybody's open to their own opinions and different things that are going on. So we're going to talk about the latest topics of the day. I have questions for him. He usually has questions for me. We talk about it and we get through it, but it's a great discussion because we both believe communication is key. I think we both agree on that, don't we?
I think we can, yes.
Yeah, it's one thing we do. We always agree on that. I'm just going to make sure the live chat is up, and I do see it. And there's Jason. It's JH Fan. Hello, you guys. You guys are here. And others will probably come in because now they're notifying folks that we're live. Super chats are enabled if you feel so choose. And I guess we'll go from there. So I always do my lists. My famous list. One day he may have one, who knows? But one day you may have one.
Don't count on it.
You may get inspired. But my list, I don't really tell you why or what. Some things will make sense to you. Some you're like, I don't know, for everybody at home. But I always do these. And one day I'll probably do a book. People have been asking me about this, like doing a book of all my lists. I have them all. I still have them all. So here we go, kids. Are you ready, Jared?
I think so, yes.
All right. As the sun's going down for me, time for the list. Let me give it a look here. Hi, Beauty for Ashes. Okay, here's my list. Ladies Chablis, in the midnight of good, in the garden of good and evil. Paris is burning. Pose the TV series. Tongues Untied. Marlon Riggs. The Crying Game. Jay Davidson. Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. Big Mama's House, Medea. Eddie Murphy, Shanae, Martin the Series. Tropic Thunder, Robert Downey Jr., Apocalypse Now, Lawrence Fishburne, James Earl Jones, The Great White Hope. Brian's Song, Billy D. Williams, RuPaul, Shangela, Tyra Sanchez, Bob the Drag Queen, Latrice Royale, and Todrick Hall. Monet Exchange, Jasmine Masters, Vanessa Del Rio, Heather Hunter, Tyra Banks, Monique. The Cockettes, Sylvester, Jermaine Stewart, Audra Lorde, Boy George and Culture Club, Pete Burns and Dead or Alive, Annie Lennox and Eurythmics. So you're smiling over there, I love it. Divine, Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, Bayard Rustin, Michael Peters, A Chorus Line, Flip Wilson, Geraldine, James Baldwin, Noah's Ark, the TV series. Lorraine Hansberry, Bill T. Jones, Alvin Ailey, Jean Anthony Ray, Barbara Jordan, Phil Wilson, Willie Ninja, Willie Smith, Andre Leon Taylor, Chicago Mayor, Lori Lightfoot, Angela Davis, my friend, Tony Moore, Adam Clayton Powell Sr., Shirley Chisholm, my late friend, Tim Dolan, my late stepfather, Larry Jones, my late brother, Max, and myself, James Lott Jr., myself on the list. So that's the list. I always ask Jared just for any comments or clarifications or.
Well, I don't know if this was the theme, but and I don't think it applied to every person or thing on the list, but there seemed to be a gay Black through line with Paris is Burning, and other James Baldwin. I think he said Bayard Rustin, either an LGBT themed Black, but then there were some that as far as I know are not part of the LGBT community, but maybe they're supporters of. So that was a theme I picked up on. Two other things just personally that one I knew, so you reminded me, one I don't think I knew. Angela Davis, who I'm a big fan of, just saw her a couple months ago at Oakland Museum, the exhibit on Angela Davis, which is awesome. I think it's still
say she's part of your area. So.
Exactly. And I found out, I don't remember how I found this out, but her birthday is January 26th, who happens to be my twins' birthday. So that was kind of cool to know that they shared a birthday. Yeah. And then I think you said your late brother named Max. My son is named Max, which I don't think we knew.
Ever talked about that? No. Yeah.
No, there's so those are some connections that I
wow. Oh, Max is still around. There's a Max still around, I should say. No, I didn't know. My late brother Max. We were very close. Yeah. Yes, Kayla Roney. Two of them were female porn stars back in the day. Very legendary porn stars. They were mentioned. And also Black men who dressed as women. That was another theme also in there. Big Mama's House, Eddie Murphy, Shanae, all that. So some of you guys did catch some of those things. So yes, but you are on the mark. So I want to begin this with a statement. So in 1984 at the Grammys, my life was changed by one sentence. The winner for Best New Artist of 1983 was Culture Club. Boy George, back then, folks, some of you guys are not old enough, it was via satellites. Because they were in England. They hadn't come to America. So they were in England. So it was via satellite. Joan Rivers was with Culture Club to hand them their Grammy. Boy George says the following sentence that people don't even realize how groundbreaking it was. America, you have taste, you have style, and you know a good drag queen when you see one. And he winks. Drag queen, that word was not even used in mainstream anything back then. And any of us who are from the 80s who first saw Boy George and then saw Dead or Alive and saw Annie Lennox and saw many of those performers who were doing androgynous stuff, even Prince. The first video I saw of Prince, he was in high heels, lingerie, and it's a silhouette. And it was like, who's that pretty girl? Then the light comes on and it's Prince singing Automatic. Talking about how he's going to take your girl while wearing those high heels and that stuff. The 80s were very good about that. But that boy George comments literally changed my life. When I saw it, I was like, wow. As my burgeoning sexuality was happening and I know what was going on, it completely spoke to me. And I thought, mainstream America accepted Boy George, if you remember, accepted Culture Club, no matter how he looked. And plus his voice was beautiful. Like, still is. He's still loud. I don't say he was beautiful. But at the same time, there was another singer, super popular R&B singer, who crossed over, but could never come out. And that was Luther Vandross. Mm-hmm. Another singer with lots of hits, and every Black woman and white woman I knew at the time were just like crooning, just swooning to his songs. And I've been seeing recent interviews with people saying how hard it was he couldn't come out. Because he was a Black man in the 80s, which many of us couldn't come out, felt safe to come out. And he was singing to a female audience mostly, and straight audience. But a lot of us had a feeling and knew he was one of the tribe. So I just look at both of that and how interesting that is, even though how outrageous the 80s was kind of, with all the hair metal bands, and all the lipstick they wore, and they were wearing girls' clothes and still getting the chicks, but being gay was something you just really couldn't be. And also being Black was not the greatest thing either back then either. So we were putting these little boxes. So I just thought very interesting thing I wanted to open up this discussion with as we're going through 50 years later, Jared, with actual laws and bills and measures being introduced, books being banned, TV shows and movies being banned in certain states. And it's just very interesting because in many of these situations, there's obviously white drag queens and white gay people, but there's a large percentage of gay people of color in many of these things. Disco, the whole disco sucks movement was mostly white folks. And disco was Black and Latino and gay.
That's how house music started in Chicago with the gay,
Yes. So it's kind of funny, there's themes. Mm-hmm. And I just open this discussion to, first, as I read that stuff, what are some of your reactions to that? And then we'll get into like our full discussion. I want to open that.
Well, it's interesting because I'm a few years younger than you, but I think we grew up, more or less in the same era. So I remember as a kid, 10, 11, like I'd say, I turned 10 in 1983. So
I was 14.
Yeah, so you're a few years older than me, but so you probably had a little head start on some of this stuff, and I wasn't particularly politically aware or savvy or interested at that age, or really at any age until about 2000.
It's so funny. Wow.
But I do remember like listening to Boy George and Culture Club and other kind of quote unquote new wave stuff, some of which I still enjoy today, and having no issue with it. But at the same time, not being clued in to, I knew enough because my dad hadn't told me he was gay until 1988. So I didn't know that I had a gay dad.
So folks, he has a unique perspective on this too. That's why I kind of brought it up. He has a unique, your dad.
And so, as let's call it 11, let's call it a middle school or maybe into freshman year, 12, 13, 14, being pretty knowledgeable about music and interested in music. And, one could tell that Boy George, what was who he was, but it was like, I don't know if I would say it was cool, but it was like, yeah, I'm fine with Culture Club. I like their music. They're into my world, they were part of the same milieu as New Order or Echo and the Bunnymen or The Cure or any of that stuff. And so they're musicians, they're artists, they're performers. So some of them are gay, and maybe they're all gay. I don't know. Like it didn't really, But I think for me, part of the safety was the distance because I was never gonna meet any of them. They weren't like personal friends of mine, or it was just like, yeah, well, they're musicians, and that's that's fine in the music industry. But then when my dad told me he was gay, things changed a little bit. Not that like all of a sudden, oh, Boy George is a faggot or anything, like it wasn't like that, but it was like, then I started to think of things a little differently. But interestingly, for this talk, as far as like, gay Black people, Blackness wasn't even in my world.
Right.
So that's the whole thing. And I think I share that, for many reasons, but I think one is that I imagine a lot of kids my age, white kids my age, same thing. Yeah, sure, we listened to some Black artists and, it was fine, but the whole nuances, or maybe not so nuanced, of like what it means to be white and gay and what it might mean to be Black and gay, that wasn't in my world.
And we're going to use that a little later in the show. That's why I'm glad you brought it. I'm going to ask you some questions about that a little later, because the contrast for me was I grew up with hippie parents. And my parents, we had friends of all kinds, so it was always explained to us who they were.
Mm-hmm.
They were fully who they were in my house. I had parents who walked around nude when I was a kid, that kind of stuff. So I had that whole, they were politically inclined. I had uncles who made drums out of trees, and then it goes everything. We listened to Gil Scott-Heron. It was a whole, we knew we were Black, and that was all about that. We had to figure, it was all so it's funny you say that for you. That's why I say I'm glad you said that, because now you have a little context. People get a little context. You have to read this book, folks. Why Can't Confront Racism is the bomb. But I'm gonna give you a context because you're gonna help us almost connect this where later you did get when you got there. We'll get to that. We'll get to that same. One step at a time, James Lott Jr. One step at a time. That's why I love talking to you. One step at a time. But for me, the opposite was true for me, which this is happening still today, where they're trying to protect white kids, yet all the rest of us of many color, coat of many colors, we're not protected in terms of what we learn at what age.
So, oh gosh, there's so many directions.
I know. We do this every time. So
I know.
Come back every time. It's come back every time.
It's good though, because I mean, there are only so many directions, and who knows where I'm going to go, where you're going to go, where we're going to go. But there's so much to choose from. It can't be wrong.
Right.
But it's interesting. A quote, and I never know who said it, and I've tried to look, and I can't find the attribution, but. And I learned it, gosh, I don't know 10 years ago. And this quote, it says, when you're used to privilege, equity feels like oppression, right? So I've used that, from time to time over the years, like if I'm speaking or if I'm moderating a panel, or sometimes if I'm doing facilitating trainings, I'll use that when appropriate. I've found myself using that like every day.
Wow.
Like the last several months.
I believe it, actually. I believe it.
It's just either thinking it or actually, replying to someone's LinkedIn post, or talking to a friend, or talking to someone who doesn't, understand. Like, because there's just so much of what you just said, this, white kids are in danger, from what? From gayness, from transness, right? So it's like this whole, and it's, that quote is just, it's a blanket kind of quote, but I think it's a place to start from, especially for people who aren't as woke.
Oh, God.
And I purposely use the term woke because we know that there's the anti-woke, and that's something we should discuss about how we.
Yes.
How can people on the left and progressives and justice inclined folks, how can we reclaim some of the language in a way that actually, isn't just jargon? Isn't just, a devolution, arguing with the right, and well, woke means this, well, anti-woke means no, like, so how do we reclaim the argument so that we actually make progress? Because there is, as and I would assume a lot of people listening know, like, it's gotten to a point like, whoa, wait a second, they're passing laws and shit. Like, I thought they did that back in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, and they're doing that in 2023. Oh shit. Okay. Now. And I think people are, waking up.
They are, because I said there are things we introduce, and almost like we're like, oh, that won't go through, and that won't, and then it goes through, or it gets serious consideration. And we're talking the highest courts of the states. It's not just some local little town. It's like actually the state of Tennessee. It's the governor of this. Like, it's not some little piece of land in the corner. But he's right. I just feel like this is such an interesting thing that we're trying to protect this certain population. Like I said, from, again, protect, put in quotes, and then everybody else is just whatever. It's like it's a free for all. And then I find interesting, like today, for example, just for reference, Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson both were fired today. So about two sides of that coin right there. So everybody's having their free for alls on both of those things, because each brought up race in different ways. They brought up sexuality, race on their shows, on different sides, of course. But that's kind of funny too. But again, the whole woke police is excited about this and what does woke mean anymore, and that's so. So I feel like it still goes back to that childhood thing of, we got to protect the white kids. We don't make them feel bad. We don't want to do all this stuff. But the black kids and the Latino kids, everything, we don't care. We'll say anything in front of them. We don't care.
Yeah. What's interesting, because I saw those headlines too, and I didn't have a chance to go deep on it. It's like, is that just a coincidence that it was the same day, or was there some sort of collaboration between the two networks? Because that is interesting. But and we can go deeper on this. And I don't know if I have the answer, but I've been thinking a lot about, how do we not celebrate like something like that, like Tucker Carlson is no, no longer, at least for now,
Right.
having this huge influence. Like, it might seem like a win, and perhaps maybe it is, like, but it's not though, because it's not like, oh, he's gonna not be on the air, and then all of a sudden people are, who listened to him for the last however long he's been around, 6, 8, 10 years, are just gonna like flip and be, get it. Like, it doesn't happen that way. So how do we reframe, what, like what's really going on, and how do we educate people who maybe aren't as, they might be politically declarative of, here's where I stand, but they're not really as in tune or informed in the nuances of what these types of things mean. Because I think sometimes we focus politically on social media, even in corporate spaces where I work, on like these wins, like, yeah, fuck Tucker Carlson, and he's out, yeah, good for him. You know how big Tucker Carlson, he's going to get a job in like two seconds, and there's going to be someone else who's going to replace him. Maybe he won't be exactly as big or exactly the same as Tucker Carlson, but it's Fox News, so it's going to be the same thing. So how do we, I don't know. I feel like we focus on the wrong things, and we go down these rabbit holes that don't actually advance what we're trying to advance.
I want to piggyback off of that thing real quick for you, that you're right, because like I bring up Rush Limbaugh, for example. I remember when he was a radio person in Sacramento. I'm talking 1,000 years ago. My father works in the Capitol, and he saw this Rush Limbaugh guy is getting big in Sacramento on the radio. Then he got really big on the radio. Then he got really big everywhere, but still mostly, well, now I guess it's radio / podcasting, which is my next point. This was just part of all this. You're right. There's so many outlets now. There's so many streaming services. There's so many platforms that you're right. So you get rid of him. Okay, great. Tucker's gone. But like, Russ was still huge. He was still, till he died. He was huge till he died. He said things, outrageous stuff and whatever. He was divisive, but he was still big. So it's like, you're right. It's like you're cutting off the head of a worm, and the head grows back. I mean, it's like there's another head that comes back. So I feel like I piggyback with you and say, yeah, exactly. So he's off. So Don Lemon's off. So there's folks who are probably happy about that. Doesn't matter. There's someone else at CNN's going to take over. There's someone else on MSNBC is going to take over. Someone else at Fox. I mean, like, there's not. It's like and those folks will move on to something else.
Yeah.
They won't be gone for good. And you never know what they're going to morph into when it becomes something bigger. Who knows? They fall into the hands of something else, and it becomes, who knows?
Well, it's interesting. And I don't know if it's worth it to get into any sort of lengthy debate about whether cancel culture is a thing or not. But this idea of like celebrating defeats of people who hold views or have acted in ways that we don't like, that are racist, that are harmful, that are, whatever. So take, for example, and I can't remember if I talked about this on our last time. If I did, I apologize for the repeat, but I think it's worth it. Amy Cooper. What's Amy Cooper doing these days? I've tried to Google her a couple months ago. I couldn't find anything recent. I don't know, like, where's Amy Cooper today? Where's Amy Cooper work? I mean, I didn't do deep research. I'm sure I probably could have, but my point is not that I'm overly concerned with Amy Cooper's welfare. For everyone who doesn't remember, Amy Cooper was the white woman in Central Park who called the cops 911 on Christian Cooper, no relation, and basically threatened, had this false, terror that a black man was attacking her. Luckily, nothing happened, but she got fired from her job. She was an executive, I think, or a VP at Franklin Templeton. So she got fired like the next day. And everyone's like, yeah, screw that bitch, that racist bitch. And yeah, right on Franklin Templeton. You think Franklin Templeton's an anti-racist organization? No. Do you think there are hundreds, thousands, millions of people who support Amy Cooper, or at least don't criticize her? Do you think she probably, got another job somewhere? Probably.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not saying, let's save all the Amy Coopers and not fire them, but how do we, do you think it's like, so Tucker Carlson's just on the same idea, kind of on a much bigger scale because he's who he is. So how do we, again, I keep going back to this, how do we not celebrate that? And how do we look at like transformative and restorative justice practices and behaviors that bring people who, not necessarily who disagree with us, because they're probably not going to be flipped or influenced, but who are kind of either neutral and or maybe less informed. And how do we bring them on to what we're talking about, but not in a like, you're with us or you're against us, and that kind of behavior? Because I think that's what just perpetuates this. Like it's not gonna get us anywhere.
Yeah, the and or thing, and I'm going to mention this one because I always like to chat. So you guys saying in the chat room, Jason Jose says anything that was underground or niche and is now pop culture faces resistance from conservatives. Kayla mentioned another thing, but the one thing Kayla mentioned was, I just want to mention this personally really quick because it was really funny. June 25th, 2009, Farrah Fawcett, MJ died. You know what I'm talking about? So here's what's funny, Kayla. That day, I remember that day because I was flying home from cross country. And I remember waking up and I'd heard that Farrah died. Now I was a huge Farrah Fawcett Majors fan. This is probably where our age difference comes in play. I was a huge Charlie's Angels fan. And I loved her and her hair, her teeth. And I was just like, I had the poster on my shirt, the whole thing, the famous poster. She's like, like this, whatever. You guys know the poster. You're old enough to know the poster. So I was a huge Farrah Fawcett fan. Also, I was a huge MJ. Who didn't like Michael Jackson? I mean, obviously a huge Michael Jackson fan. But I remember when Farrah died, she died that morning. It was announced that morning. And you're right. They were talking about her at first. I mean, icon. I mean, if she died alone that day, she probably would have gotten a full day's worth of coverage. But Michael Jackson died. And I remember I got off the plane and somebody told me, well, Michael Jackson. I go, no, Farrah Fawcett died. I was like, no, Farrah Fawcett died. Like, no, Michael Jackson died too. I thought, how weird is that to have two celebrities die the same day? But I always look at that as very much about Michael Jackson was bigger than Farrah Fawcett. I mean, Michael Jackson was like king of pop. I mean, he was so well known around the world that I remember feeling bad for her because it did kind of eclipse her death because she was sick. She had the cancer, ass cancer or something she had, and then Michael was a shock. So I always get those two things kind of funny, and I always feel like that's one of the few times where the black man got more attention, so to speak, than the white woman on some level. But I think only because he was so universally, I don't have to do it race, is it? He was so universally loved. So it's just funny you mentioned that at home. I just had to count. I remember that day because I loved both artists. And I was shocked by, but Farrah, she had been sick and she was documenting on a TV show and stuff. But his thing was so like, what? Michael Jackson? Like, what? He's gonna go on tour. He's come back to life. It's just like. So, but if you want to talk about racism being a part of the Jackson family and the whole thing with the molestation stuff, that's another story too. That's another whole other show. I think race had something to do with that also, but that's another thing. But anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I it's until Kayla said it in the chat, I didn't remember that coincidence of that.
See how funny.
Yeah. But I'm not maybe as tuned into the details of that as you are, James. So it's like I don't beat myself up for not remembering that.
Right.
But now that it's brought up, I think what you just said is, the other thing Kayla says though is, all right, so obviously, Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson both being fired the same day, is coincidentally similar. But it's obviously not as tragic, of course. But it'll be interesting to see, as she said, like no one's really talking about Don. And I wonder if that's a good thing in a way.
Right.
Like, is it, well, we know it's racism, but right. Is it in a way, is it, is Tucker Carlson bigger than Don Lemon because he's racist and sensational and a liar and, all the things? And is that worth talking about more? Because I don't know if you do or if anyone's kind of, if we know what are the official and actual reasons why they each were fired, and maybe that'll come out in the coming days and weeks and stuff. But I can't imagine, at least for Tucker Carlson, that Fox News had some like, ideological disagreement with him and said, we have to let you go because you said X. It's like, no, there's probably some political something.
Well, no, let me stop here. Let me tell you a little bit, because the whole thing, I don't know if you followed this, the whole thing about them lying.
Well, yeah.
They won the lawsuit. So so you're right. In the coming days, we eventually see what they say. Tucker's already talking, Don's already talking, but I'm curious to see what they say, because everybody's claiming it's because of this lawsuit, and he was one of the main proponents of the lies, so that they let him go. Don said on his own words that he was shocked after 17 years they did not warn him. So, but they're claiming they did. So I'm curious to see what the heads say.
Yeah.
And Don and Tucker. I'm actually more curious what they say.
So are you saying that potentially for Tucker, because they just settled for like
$787 million.
There you go, right? Which I read some brief headline or article that is like, that's like pocket change. Like that's just part of doing
for
business.
him. Oh yeah, for them, yeah.
Well, for him and for Fox, it's like, it was probably worth it to
it's like worth $4 or $5 billion apparently or something.
Yeah, to have perpetuated and just held this line and influenced so many people for the last 3 years, that's worth 800 million to have done that, right? And so I wonder if there's kind of like an analogy back to the Amy Cooper, Franklin Templeton, is Fox News go already, and maybe you've read, I haven't been following it super closely other than just some of the headlines. Is Fox News going to claim like, yeah, we don't lie here, and Tucker was just, kind of perpetuating these lies, and and that's just not part of our value, so he had to go. Hey, no one's bigger than the network. Like, is it going to be that kind of spin, which we know is total fucking bullshit?
Right, of course.
But then it's like, that's an easy thing. So then, I'm not a Fox News viewer, but I can imagine the people who are, are they fans of Tucker Carlson, and or are they fans of Fox News? And more pertinently, I think, like, does it, and if it does, why does it matter to political safety for people and truth and and progress and those types of things?
And I agree with you. As I said, I'm more interested because I said, the boys are starting to talk a little bit and say what they're going to say. That's fine. But I'm curious what the big heads are going to say, because right now, as it stands, they don't have to apologize publicly for what they've done. Fox News gets to go about the business and life goes on. So to me, I feel like, there's some dead weight here. Bye. Who else is going to get fired? Like, bye. And then they will move on to something, they'll move on with somebody else. It's safer. Let's put it behind us, right? I like what you're saying. I kind of feel like what you're saying is probably spot on. We haven't heard any of that yet, but I'm saying I'm kind of going like you that direction. Now with Don, yes, Don has been controversial over the years. He has over the years. Lots of memes made of him, also these things like stuff. And Tony JC, hello, welcome to the show. They say they're trying to blame Don for bad ratings and program choices. Again, that's like just saying irreconcilable differences in a marriage. It's like a blanket term. These are all blanket terms. But, I mean, it's like the case they say. We say like we just can't come to a conclusion. Okay, got it.
Well, I'm interested because I don't have a fully formed opinion yet, or I'm leading in because I want to ask you a question. So, like in my work in the corporate space, when we talk about this idea of like spheres of influence. So let's say I'm doing a training and it's a company, I don't know, I'll just make some numbers up. There's 500 people and there are 50 people in the session. We're having a discussion, I don't know, about privilege or, and then it always ends at the end, like, okay, well, what do we do? All right. And there's always some prototype of this, some person of this prototype who's potentially junior-ish, doesn't have a ton of influence. They're not a senior leader. They're not in the executive suite, but they would consider themselves like a burgeoning change agent. So they love what we're doing. They see it either personally because they've experienced it, and or because they just see it in their company and they really want to, make change. But they are also keenly aware of the reality and the politics of their specific, organization. So it's like, well, what do? I can't just go to my CEO and say, hey, dude, fuck off. You're ruining it, because so it's like, how, so I always say, hey, do you know anyone who's more senior than you who you've established some sort of relationship with, who gets you? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so it's like about building alliances and building commonality and doing that kind of almost like grassroots, like I'm not a community organizer, but what I imagine like community organizers do, like, hey, let's get this. So I guess my question to you is, when we think of like the behemoth mammothness of a Fox News, it's going to be here, maybe not forever, but for the foreseeable future. So how do we, James, Jared, people on the left, other people, knowing that we're never going to persuade or convince or flip any of those people, what is the left's kind of version of like spheres of influence to get enough where it does kind of tip the tide back to what it seemed like was happening maybe 10 years ago, but now seems like it's going the opposite, not just with Trump, but with DeSantis and Huckabee Sanders and all the, anti-trans and anti-gay and all these things. So I know that was a long-winded kind of question, but I guess the heart of it is, how do we get just enough people to get the momentum back the right way, historically right way?
So here's the problem. Sorry to answer your question with a problem. Here's the problem. Here's the problem, kids. Everything you said, I agree with the whole thing about the Fox is big. It's going to be here, blah blah. It's not going nowhere. Because I used to work in the corporate world, and I've worked in the medical corporate world. I've worked in the insurance corporate world. I've been in several different ones, and usually it's what I say. What I'm telling you guys, it's usually the company comes first. We have to rid whatever. Thank you, Caleb, for the super chat. Thank you very much. Right, thank Caleb, please. Thank you. We appreciate that. It goes towards JLJ Media and our 11th anniversary. It's been 11 years as JLJ Media here on YouTube this week. So thank you. I've been in positions of management. I've been in positions of lower, on the floor. So it's like literally on the floor. But it's all the same for me. It's all about the bottom line. The bottom line is money. The bottom line is image, perception. Those are the three things. So most of the companies that I worked for will sacrifice and have a chopping block and don't give a shit to save the bottom line and the perception. And that could be women, could be younger, could be older, could be race, could be anything. Could be seniority, could be whatever. And so for me, so that's always been a problem. So, okay, so I just mentioned that part. So that leads into your question. The problem is, on the left, we're not unified. Unfortunately, for those of us who are on the right, they're unified. Many of them are unified. There's cracks happening, but the majority of them are Trumpers. There are other old style Republicans that are trying to emerge, like the Mitt Romneys on there, trying to emerge. But most of them, a lot of them, they're very united on several major issues.
Yeah.
And that crosses, great, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. When you first said they're unified, I'm like, are they? But then I was thinking, and I'm not a political analyst, so I'm not like, I'm sure there are people with much more nuanced observations and insights than I have. But I think you're right. Like, if I already, like, as I said earlier, I'm already feeling that all this equity is actually oppressing me, straight, white, Christian, whatever dominant, culture or combination of dominant cultures, identities I have. If I'm already feeling that, and then I have this chorus, this unified, to use your kind of concept, of just a blanket generic that no one really knows what it means, of anti-woke, and that resonates with me, then fuck yeah. I live in Arkansas, but you're in Florida, and yeah, screw those. Yep. Right on, DeSantis. I live in Tennessee, and the two Justins, right?
Yes.
Yeah, screw those, N words, right?
Mhm.
So I guess in a sense, the unity, unfortunately, is hate masked as protection, protectiveness. And then maybe that's what I was getting at earlier. What's the left's kind of counter to that? That's just
I'm gonna go deeper. I'm not even done. I'm gonna go deeper.
okay. Go deeper. Go deeper.
I'm gonna go even deeper. I'm not even done. But it's funny. You see, I'm glad I opened you up to him. That's what this show's about. He's like, we do to each other. He makes us think about things. So we process on this show. We always process on the show. I love it. I'm not even done. I got more to get into. I'm gonna blow your mind some more. Okay. So as I was saying, on the right, they're more unified, and it actually crosses color. Because if you show me a drag queen, they always find one doing sexual dances, and there's a child nearby, and some video, and it doesn't matter what the drag queen's color, it doesn't matter, just a drag queen, you show it, then anybody who's like drag queens or gay people, which crosses color and status and class, will all go, we hate that. That's not good. I know a lot of Black folks and Latino folks who are Republicans, who are conservative, because it's all about God and guns. It's all about the family. And then when they say the family, the traditional family. And so that's what's also scary for left people on the left also, because now you're crossing color lines. So you gather more people, to be on your side, to be unified. And on the left, we have several different factions going on. There are a lot of people who are in the middle. There are a lot of independents. There are a lot of people in the middle who are kind of like, I'm not fully left, I'm not fully right, but I'm somewhere here. And I'm kind of like one of those people. I'm actually more center than I am left in many ways. I think as I'm getting older, I'm getting a little more conservative in certain things. Not a lot of things, certain things. Which that's naturally happens. They find that naturally happens, right? When you have kids and stuff, just your things change. Your brain changes about certain things. But on the left, it's kind of divided because it's like everybody has their own mini agendas. So I guess the first thing would be, can we all come together with all those mini agendas and still feed everyone? Because not everyone's a Biden fan on the left. Not everybody's like, we all love Biden. Not everybody's love Biden. Many folks voted for Biden just because he was the choice. They didn't want Trump. And they see other viable candidates. Remember, there were a lot of Bernie Sanders fans out there. It was very divided for a while. And so I was saying, how are we going to do this? And again, I always say for myself, and I said this before on the show, my three choices were three old white men. It didn't matter what their politics were. Is that my only choice? Really? Those are my only three choices? Really?
Yeah.
Really? Those are my only three choices? Like, to me, there's something wrong with that period in both parties. That's another discussion. But I think on the left, we're not united because we have too many different mini agendas. There's super left, there's this left, there's that left, there's this left, and then some left, they don't care for gays either, or they don't see racism either. They're a little too liberal. Or like we don't. There's things that are happening in this country that transcend both sides, but the right seems to kind of unify. Whether we don't really know what all their policies are, but they're very much unified in what they don't want and what they don't want to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because, like you and I know a lot of people know, like when DeSantis or whoever says anti-woke, it's really anti-Black, it's anti-gay, it's anti-trans, it's anti, all the things. But it's a nice, it's a convenient unifier for anyone who, for whatever reason and whatever degree of, of concern they have, to go, oh yeah, screw that wokeness, screw that woke crowd. And I think, as you were talking, I was thinking about this idea of, this little idea called white supremacy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just a little thing. And and so many people over the years, from Malcolm X to Martin Luther King to James Baldwin to, speak about this. Even like Ibram Kendi, if we're going to get like modern, this idea that, white supremacy isn't the KKK. I mean, that is white supremacy.
Well, no, yeah. Say it again. I was cut this part out. He said on that show. Say it again.
Isn't only the KKK, right? White supremacy is people like me who are liberals, who are woke, who are left, choosing not to take action to support the things we claim to believe in. And I'm using first person plural because I'm sure I'm guilty of it as well. And I think to some degree, that's the challenge. How does each of us, and then, us collectively, and I'm not talking about just white folks, but largely white folks, if we say, hey, we see what's going on, and it's actually hurting people who I know, or even if I don't know them, hurting people whose identity I care about, but it doesn't affect me, Jared Karol, directly. I think that's the challenge.
You know what it is? I'm gonna stop right there because I changed some language the other day for myself. I was like, I should say, affected people. My person, I'm gonna stop saying that, because in a way, we're all affected.
Totally.
We're not targeted. There are targeted groups, but this is my own thing. This is my most recent thing, Jared, that I came to my conclusion myself. It's my own recent thing, where I stopped saying minorities. I say people of color. I don't say minorities anymore. They're not minor. But this is one mind that said, wait a minute. Actually, if we're all one big village, and if it's true that what one person does affect the village, then there's targeted people, but we're all affected.
Yeah,
so I'm doing it for myself.
I like that distinction, and I'm interested in and familiar with and kind of subscribe largely to kind of the Buddhist anti-racist approach, right? I've read a lot of, I don't know if they're household names, if people would know of them, but, Angel Kyoto Williams and Rhonda McGee and Ruth King and, Lama Rod Owens, and they're Black, and many of them queer, and they're also, they're Buddhist, and they practice mindfulness and self-awareness and all the things that, that the Dalai Lama is doing, and Thich Nhat Hanh's doing, and Buddha was doing, right? And it's definitely a different approach than the militant, Black Panther kind of approach, right? And one common theme that I see in a lot of that writing is basically what you said, and I like how you just simplified it with, like, we might not all be affected or impacted the same way. Or we might not all be targeted as equally, but we are all impacted. Maybe not to the same level, because obviously if you're targeted, you're the recipient of that impact is going to be more severe. But you're absolutely right. And I think there's a great quote, maybe I'm not going to be able to find it or remember it, but it speaks to that, like this cutoffness for white people, the cutoffness from empathy, the cutoffness from love and from caring and from being in community. That's people, we don't even recognize it, that we're missing that. And we are, because we're not aware enough, or we're not courageous enough, or we don't have enough conviction, and we just, we see things, we know they're wrong, but we don't do anything about it. We don't rally, we don't support, we don't change.
One of the things that got me thinking that was this recent banning, I think first they're banning drag shows in Tennessee. That's number one. But there's a new law they're trying to pass where you have to be over 21 to go to events. And the way it's phrased, it almost sounds like any event you have to be 21 or over. So people are asking, so is it for, so now is it for any events? Like straight events? Or so now there's some controversy, but see, it goes to wording. It goes, what does, they think they're targeting one thing, but see, and you could be next. So it's like, you gotta be careful with all this kind of like, ha, look at you. And because it could also bounce on you somehow and be affected suddenly. You may not be targeted, That's what first hit me. And so I was like, yeah, what is the clarification? I haven't heard clarification yet, because I haven't heard but that was all things like, well, so we have a St. Patrick's Day parade. That means no, we can't bring our kids to that either. Like, it's like, what happened, kids? So that made me chuckle, but also made me think. Like,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Like, because of wording, we all know contracts. You and I, we all know what contracts are. There are contracts that that if you don't read the fine print, you're fucked.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and Tony's saying in the chat, because it doesn't affect you. It's not personal to individuals. Right. And that's the challenge. And that,
you wrote a whole book on that. You wrote a whole book on that. That's crazy.
Well,
about that top to get people to get
engaged. It is, because it's this idea that whatever your degree of fluency, and whether you're on the left and you're supportive of equality and equity, or you're not, there's sometimes too similar of an argument that I think kind of Tony's talking about. Because I remember, I'll bring back my old friend Matt into the conversation.
Oh, Matt! Oh, long-time viewers, they're still not friends. Some of them want you together, but that's another story. I know what you're talking.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story.
Yes.
But when we would have discussions that later turned into arguments that later turned into us not being friends, the main thrust of his argument, when I would say, hey, what you said or the way you're thinking or what you did is racist and here's why, and it would always come back to him for, he retorted once, and I can't remember the exact details of how it got to this, but he said, Jared, if you and I met the same 10 Black people, I guarantee each one of them would want to be friends with me and not you. And that was his argument. And part of he was trying to diss me and, kind of hurt my feelings or whatever. But what it showed to me was, oh, he thinks this is about like being nice. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, that's a really kind of random hypothetical, but I suppose that could be true. I'm not going to argue that. But the reason I share so many Matt stories is because I think it's representative of a larger view. So he thinks it's about being nice, and his relationships with Black people, however, whatever their length and their context and et cetera are, it's either been like, he was nice or he wasn't. And if he wasn't, then he had a chip on his shoulder, and that's kind of typical of Black people. Like, it was that kind of logic. And so I think sometimes white people who are more progressive, who do feel like what's going on is wrong and they want it to change, still are looking at it from kind of like the wrong angle, around it being just about interpersonal relationships. It is about that, because that goes back to the whole sphere of influence and who are you interacting and influencing, but it's not just about that.
Yes.
So it's like, if I have an experience, I go, well, here's my experience. Okay, great. Your experience, Jared, your experience is valid, but doesn't mean it's representative of what's going on in the world.
It's funny, to go back to also a second part of your question answer for me. Second part of my answer to your question, I get a sentence out, is Fox News is this behemoth that represents the right. I'll say represents. So it's blasts into everybody's homes, blah, blah. Then, but on the left, we have too many stations that are all varying degrees of liberalism. And MSNBC is not the same as CNN. They're different. And there's also other outlets like Vice or there's another one I watch sometimes that actually do real investigative work. They're on streaming services and stuff. So it's not just where Fox News is basically Fox News. And what's funny is there is Fox Sports and Fox, those are all different kinds. Those are different things. Fox TV shows. They're all part of the big thing, but they're not part of that. But Fox News really is seen as the standard and as well highly watched. Whereas in MSNBC, it's divided on the left. It's divided. And I think to go back to your question, see, my problem is I work in television, folks. Everything's infotainment. That's what I call it. It's infotainment. Hard news. I mean, and I love 60 Minutes. I've been a 60 Minutes fans for years. But when they had Marjorie Taylor Greene on there, it made me question their credibility a little bit. Leslie Stahl is a fantastic journalist. I mean, like years of experience. And watching her roll her eyes, I'm like, I mean, she was probably thinking, why the fuck am I doing this interview? I know it's part of my job. Marjorie Taylor Greene is fucking crazy. But you question that. But I'm like, I'm trying to find, you want to find hard news, you're going to have to go on streaming services, pay for it, and actually go watch like shows like Vice is a Vice TV, which does real in-depth stuff, or go not to Bill Maher because he's tired now too. Find other folks, in my opinion, find other folks who are really talking about stuff that actually makes sense.
Well, I think you're right, and it made me think of two things. One's a question for you and for us, because maybe I have some insight, but I don't know. And the other's an observation. I'm seeing, I'm in the work I do in the corporate space, which is about facilitating conversations, holding space for people to have dialogue about hard things, right? Privilege, marginalization, race, mental health, all these different things. And actually, hey, yeah, this is hard. And that's why we need to do this. So I and the people who I work with and train, we're trained to hold that space, to sit with awkward silences, to, if someone says something egregious, you don't just, tell them they're an asshole and, kick them out. Like, how do you hold that space while still protecting the people who are going like, what's he going to say about this when that guy just said that, right? So there are all kinds of like skills and angles to consider. But what I found is, to what you were saying, there, and people have written about this. Adrienne Marie Brown I'm a huge fan of her. She has a book called We Will Not Cancel Us. There's a book called Conflict is Not Abuse by Sarah Schulman that I'm a huge fan of. I just read a book a few weeks ago that I loved, Kazu Haga, called, what's it called? I can't remember the title, but it's about, he's a practitioner of Kingian nonviolence, right? And his whole book is about basically debunking all this myths about what nonviolence is. And it's beautiful. It's awesome. But anyway, all these books are kind of getting at this idea of like on the left, and they might call it the left or in the social justice community or in movements or whatever the language they're going to use, that we're not only do we disagree, and there's so many things to be, for, environmentalism and race and gender and sexual orientation, all these things, which is fine, they're all important. But then people are so quick to call it what you want, cancel, critique, attack, intimidate, people who in theory should kind of be on the same team-ish, right? And so that inner kind of dissension, I think, is what you were talking about earlier, prevents us from having a united stand against this anti-woke, which we know is bullshit, but it's pretty strong and pretty clear what they're trying to say. So that's one part of it. My question back to you and to us is, right now, in 2023, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the anti-woke crowd fairly unified, and it's making a lot of progress for them. And the other side is kind of all over the place and not making progress. That's how it's always been, though. And that's not how it necessarily has to be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What do we think are the trends? Like, and I'm not even talking about tactics and strategies, although we can get to that, but like, we just know that sometimes it aligns where there is greater unification and sometimes it doesn't. So maybe I'm trying to spin it in a positive way. Like, yeah, right now it's this way, but how might it change, in some period of time in the future?
I don't have any answers at all. I couldn't tell you shit. I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, because I don't see hope. So I'm trying to see hope, and it's hard for me to see hope. So I think all I see is dissension, and it's getting worse. And it's the inner dissension that scares me the most, because there isn't a united gay front. There's racism in the gay community. I don't go to certain gay spaces because they don't want Black folks there. So we're all gay, but it doesn't matter that I'm Black. That comes first. We're not a united Black community. We're still in the crab's barrel mentality. A few of us make it. We want to bye, see you later. Everybody else is still back to going, what about us? You know, kind of thing. And no one's helping each other. Everybody's seeing each other as competition. As I'm just like, no, we're not competition. We're not, you know, we're all part of the pie. But so my problem is I can't see how we can do anything unless we get united. Unless we start changing that stuff and go, okay, let's all put all this other bullshit aside. We have this one common enemy right now. We got to fight them for this, you know, this thing. And I feel like in history, it has happened. Obviously, civil rights movement, Blacks got together from all walks of life, got together. The AIDS movement, I was there. Many gay folks and lesbians came together to fight the government and fight the system. We would have drugs and things. We wouldn't even be where we were today. People like myself, I protested. I was out there protesting. So I see there are times in history that people did come together and it was a community. But then when things get a little better or they change, it dissipates. And we've told this before on the show, there's a sense of just kind of calmness. And there's another word I'm looking for that can be right now. You're just kind of like, yeah, everything's fine, right? Or it's mostly fine. It's okay, you know, blah, blah.
Complacency?
Yes, that's the word. Yeah, thank you. Complacency. Thank you. I couldn't get the word. That happens. And then something, bam, George Floyd happens. Everyone's like, what? This is still going on. Like, it's been going on ever since. Now we have camera phones. Like, so I just feel like, you know, drag queens been around for a long time. They've been around forever. RuPaul came out like 1992. Like, she was the first one to be really big. Come around. Like I said, I named some of these people who have done drag on movies and TV shows to great acclaim. Let me go back to fucking Jack Lemmon and them dressing, you know, so like it hot. I mean, like we go back to it's always been part of the culture, but suddenly, and I say suddenly in quotes, it's now endangering children.
Mm-hmm.
That's the narrative. So you would think that everyone who's for it, that something's wrong with drag, would come together. Well, there's some gay folks who don't like drag, and they don't want RuPaul drag. So it's like, so if their infighting is happening, like you said earlier, then what can we do?
Well, that goes back to, and I don't know how strategic. I mean, obviously, I'm not behind the scenes in Florida or, you know, in the RNC or, you know, any, but it seems like there's some level of strategic coalition across governments, you know, states at local and state level and national, that, I mean, in a way, I hate to say this, but it's the simplicity of it is brilliant. You just label everything anti-woke, or, you know, you say you label everything woke. And if I'm a conservative who's not gay, who's not Black, or maybe I am Black, but I'm not gay, or, you know, whatever combination, but I lean conservative and I don't want all that stuff. If I'm DeSantis or Trump or, you know, whoever, and I just say, yeah, that we don't want that woke stuff here, I don't even really have to know what that means, other than, oh, woke means no CRT and no gays and no drag queens and trans girls can't play sports, and, you know, like it kind of covers everything without having to really go into any, you know, thinking. So what is the left doesn't have a version of that, because to your point, the version would be like, you know, fuck all y'all, and anyone who is anyone has rights, and we're going to fight for that. Well, that's a lot to ask for. I mean, it shouldn't be, but given what we've been talking about, that's a lot to ask for. And so how do people with their very important and relevant, you know, causes that they're narrowly interested in, which in and of itself is good, it's almost like distracting from a potential unification that would probably topple the anti-woke, message?
Well, there are things that are everything you said. I totally agree with, and there are things though that I think are just so insidiously ingrained in all of us as Americans that we just don't even maybe we don't see it or realize it. I support Black business and brown business all the time. I support all business. Obviously, I have friends of all races. I support all. If you're small business, I'm always trying to support you. But I do go out my way sometimes to find a Black barber, a Black gardener, a Black electrician, Black plumber, which I have all those. They all been in business for years. They're just as good, if not better, than anybody else. But a lot of other peeps who are Black, they go straight for white because that's what we were raised, and that was what we mostly saw. That's kind of the standard, considered the standard. And I'll mention, I have a Black garden, a Black this. Well, no, I'd rather do this instead. I'd rather go with this person instead. What if I told you the pricing's the same, and they're just like that whole thing? And it's like, but sometimes we're just not trained, or like a professional organizer. A lot of Black and brown folks tell me I had no idea. I thought it was a luxury item. White folks knew it was a luxury item, but other races, and I mean, let's go from Arab to Middle Eastern to everything. It was very much about we do everything ourselves. So if somebody else comes, culturally somebody else comes in the house, there's something wrong with us. It's like, no, we're here to assist you and help you. So I had to change minds there and made a positive change because they were just raised a certain way. So like a lot of times I think there are things put in our brains that we just maybe walking around not even really knowing we're doing this. Like, why are we so hard at Adidas and everything when it could be a Black designer doing a shoe just as well, perhaps even better, but we're busy over here. We've had a few. The FUBU was big for a minute, and like I said, Sean John, all those. But like, why is it, what happened to there's Tommy Hilfiger's bigger, Ralph Lauren is bigger. Like all those they're still bigger. Mark Echo was bigger at one time. Like, they're all still bigger. So it's like, I think there's something with that too.
Well, you bring up a good point. Like in the corporate space, we talk about conscious inclusion. Like if you don't consciously include, you're going to unconsciously exclude, right? So I think that's what you're talking about. And for me, and I haven't been following this story super closely, so I'm not sure exactly where it's at. Maybe you do, with the whole Bud Light. And
I know it. Oh yeah, I know it.
So catch me up on exactly where we are. Let me tell you what I know about, right? So they have this Dylan Mulvaney is this spokesperson, right? And presumably someone at Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch, or whatever the parent company is, said, "Hey, this is going to be a politically good move because people are going to appreciate this, and we're going to, we're going to lose some people, but I'm sure it's all very calculated about how much they're going to lose and how much they're going to gain, and they decide." But I wonder, and I think I know the answer. Was it really done for like heart strong conviction political beliefs, or was it a political gamble that now that they got so much backlash from douchebags like Kid Rock and whoever the country Travis Tritt, right, who were very anti, aggressively, shooting Bud Light cans and and so I think, tell me if I'm wrong, haven't they kind of removed her from their sponsorship and I can't remember exactly where it happened, but I know it's kind of gone a different direction, as opposed to them going, you know what, fuck you, transphobic motherfuckers. We chose her and we're sticking with her. So if you got a problem, then drink another beer. But right. But you don't see that very often. So then it just goes back to the status quo. And all the executives at Anheuser-Busch are like, oh shit, like what do we do? Okay, let's calculate it. If we stay on this path, we'll make this much money. But if we switch paths, we'll make this much money. We gotta go, right? That's what the conversations are about. They're not about. And so it's like the worst, most high profile example of tokenism like you could imagine. And to what end? Like there's no progress. Or is there? Maybe, am I being too cynical? Is there some progress? I don't know.
There's no progress, but it's funny that but see, also have to remember this too. We're in the world of compartmentalization, meaning everyone, almost your whole life is now curated in terms of what you see and what you don't, what you will let in and what you won't. So again, and how do we get to everyone if you're like, my life is on social media, I follow these 200 people only. I watch one channel. I go to this comedy club. I go to this restaurant. I live in this section of town. It's getting that micro. So, but it affects the macro, because if everyone is doing that, then how do you get the progress? How do you get the message to someone who may need to hear it on either side? I mean, it could be like, they may not even know this is happening over here, and you believe what they believe too, but you're so busy over here looking at the same 10 people on Instagram and watching the same TV shows, and that, because it is that localized, that's a newer thing. That's a very much a newer thing. Because you got on your Twitter line, you can follow only certain people on Twitter. You can totally make your Twitter feed only certain people.
Totally.
You know.
Well, I think that dynamic that you just brought up goes back to the challenge of, and I use the left. I don't even really like using that language, but like people who care about people, all people, the left, social justice people, movement, whatever we want to call it, right? That people are inclined towards that. I find, and I know this because I used to not be this way. I used to not read shit, books or otherwise.
Right.
And then when I did start really reading, it was kind of like what you described. It was very narrow. Like I'm going to read about, X. And then, I read 3, 4, 5, 10 books, whatever. I'm like, okay. But then what was I not reading? And all the different angles that were, different perspectives and angles and approaches to the same, idea. And so now that I do read voraciously, and I have for 15 years, and all kinds of things, and not that I know everything, that's not what I'm getting at, but, there are different ways to go about reaching the same goal. And I think part of the internal dissension is that someone, to their credit, has done a lot of work, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of inner work, whatever it is, personal development, professional development, and they've got a philosophy, an approach, let's just say, about anti-racism, and which is great, and they're successful, and yes, you should follow them and listen to them, and if they're coaches or speakers, pay them for their work, right? All the things. And then someone else comes in and says, hey, here's an approach that's wrong. Oh, are you even familiar with it? No. Oh, so it's wrong. The thing you're not familiar with is wrong. Right. And so I think, I'm not saying everyone needs to read everything by everyone. That's impossible. But this idea that if anything kind of contradicts our specialty, there's no room for a both and.
Right.
And I think that's part of the problem. It's like, wait a second, I get your thing and I don't disagree with it. And they're like these thousands of people doing it this way who are also successful. Just saying.
Well, see, that's done. That's done. We can't have and or and but or however comma. Those are all done. That all's done. That's all done because it's my way or that's it. You got to feel this way and that's it. And I'm like, well, no, there's 10 ways to do something sometimes, and probably 9 of them are really good.
Yeah.
But 9 of them are probably really good ways.
Well, you know what I'm finding, and I use myself both because it's my own lived experience, but I think I'm illustrative of just, more than just me. The last, let's call it 4 or 5 years, I've kind of been an entrepreneur and self-marketing, like with the book and everything. That's how I met you. But at the same time, I had almost a full-time job. So I wasn't as needy for really pushing myself and marketing myself. And now, the last 2.5 years, I actually only have a full-time job and I'm not really doing, much else. So there's less pressure on me to go out and be this, this guy, this anti-racist guy, and buy my book and hire me for this. And it's so when I speak, on this show, or if I write on LinkedIn or whatever, I'm not really trying to sell anything. And so I'm noticing, so whereas 3, 4, 5 years ago, I kind of was, even though you try and say you're not, you try and be authentic and, but you're still trying to get gigs, you're still trying to get clients and whatever it is, right? And not that, there are other ways to go about that, but I think in this work, and of course, me being a white guy, that's even extra, challenging, like, oh, who's the white guy trying to, get paid to do this work, right? So there's that whole thing. But I'm saying even like, the Black people who I respect and admire and have read their stuff, if they've written books, there's still an element, and I get it. I'm empathetic to it. Like there's still an element of like, this is how I make my living. So if you don't buy my book or if you don't hire me, then I don't get paid. And I get it. But the reality is like, if I paid everyone who I respect, like I'd have no money.
Right.
And so there's that dynamic, I think, too, that there's this competition. And, because it's like, yeah, we need educated, informed, committed, with conviction people doing this work. And that brings in the whole competition for gigs.
It is. And again, it's back to infotainment. No matter how earnest you are, we start over. For many people, not for all, no matter how earnest you are, it is again infotainment again. Even on a book circuit, even on a podcast circuit, even it's very much how can I be bright and shiny? What is my main quote that I'm gonna repeat everywhere I go? My tagline. How can I get affiliated with some kind of product?
Mm-hmm.
Or some person who's a little larger who will bring me along. Like it really is all that. And you see very little people who just say, I'm putting out a book, I want people to read it. I'm here for hire, life goes on. And some of those make it too. But it's like, but most of it is, I'm hiring a PR person, we're gonna do a makeover, and we're gonna make me into something that's a cross between who you are authentically plus who they think you need you to be to get gigs. Trust me, I'm in the business. I know this like the back of my hand because I'm sure I almost as certain as you are white. I probably would be larger and in a larger space if I did certain things. And I just refuse to do them. I almost like being the underdog. I like being the person who kind of knows everybody in the business, but he's not super famous. It's like I kind of like that.
Do you like being beneath the underdog?
Sure, why not?
I was hoping you'd get that reference. That was the title of Charles Mingus's autobiography, Beneath the Underdog.
I didn't know that one. But my whole thing is this: it's just kind of like there are certain things I won't do.
Yeah.
Just to, and what's funny is when you have your purpose and you walk in that naturally. Sometimes you're on Jimmy Kimmel. Not everybody can say that. I can. So sometimes you're in Forbes magazine. I didn't have to do anything extra. I didn't do anything extra to get those things. They came to me.
Yeah.
I stayed on my true path because I enjoy doing this because I'm not making it to be rich and famous. It was just that I felt like what I'm doing is what people need to see and what I need to do. There are a few of us out there. There are a few of us that are out there who are doing that, but we're not as big as some of our counterparts. But I'm telling you, ask a lot of people, they know who I am. I'm just not famous in like public circles.
Yeah. Do you think anyone who, this is gonna be a hard question to ask and to answer, but like, do you think anyone who like is at another level, and I'm not necessarily talking about like actors or athletes or anything, but like kind of professionals or anti-racist, I don't know, take like an Ibram Kendi or someone, or like a Brene Brown.
Right.
And I know Brene Brown doesn't do but whatever their field is, who they've kind of like, what like qualitative researcher has their own Netflix special, right? So she's definitely reached a level of celebrity that is kind of, not really normal in her field.
Well, I laugh at on Netflix was the oh my God, Homegirl who I don't care for. The KonMari method. What's her name? Now I talk so much shit about her in press. I'm like, now I can't give her name right now. Of course, that's what I get. Oh my God, from Japan, that chick. Well, anyway,
I don't know.
I know. I've talked some shit about it in the press. I'm great, but she has the KonMari method. Marie Kondo. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
And then also there's a new special coming out for the the art of Swedish death cleaning or whatever is coming out too. And it's funny because they had a particular concept that I, as a professional organizer, most of us were like, that doesn't work for everybody. It actually goes against most of our tenets of organizing, but it's so shocking and big and easy to put out there, infotainment. So to go with your thing, I think a lot of them, they probably were nice and earnest, moving right along, doing their thing, and then you get opportunity. I feel like some of them sold themselves out.
Well, maybe you kind of answered the question before I even had a chance to actually ask it, but you knew where I was going. Marie Kondo, Brene Brown, Ibram Kendi, I don't
Iyanla Vanzant, another one. When I saw her show, I was like, okay, girl, I used to love you, but now it's sensationalism to me.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Like people, I loved Stamped from the Beginning. I love How to Be Anti-Racist, just as a book. I like the way he went about it and told stories. His parents met in Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, like 6 months after my parents met. So I just love, so I really do respect him. I follow him on Instagram, not that I'm on there that often, but I like what he's saying. And so I've seen, clips of him and I respect him. I like his approach, etc. And I wonder, because he is now the celebrity anti-racist, he's a professor, he's a social media star, he's a speaker, he's obviously an author. How authentic is he? I like Brene Brown. I know she gets a lot of shit, and some of it's legit.
I like her too. I like her. I do like her.
I used to listen to her podcast for a while. I've read several of her books. I like the angle that she comes at things with, like the EQ thing, and I just wonder. And I actually liked her Netflix special. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I watched it whenever it came out a couple of years ago. So it's not that I don't like them, but I just wonder, how authentic are they to who they really are now that they are so huge?
I think there are a few. I like Eckhart Tolle. I like him. I feel like he hasn't really sold out or anything. I don't mind some of TD Jake's stuff, but he's a corporation now too, so to speak. He's a brand. But some of his stuff I really do like. My friend Dr. Steve Perry, I feel like he's still very authentic as he's going through this stuff. So there are a few. I think there are a few, but it depends on your personal views of how much you're going to sell. Because I'm telling you, I've been offered shows over the years from big name like Fremantle Media. It's a big name media company that I said no to because I was not going to do. My friends and family know who I am, and so this is not an acting gig. We're different. This is actually presenting myself as reality. I turned it down. I had a problem maybe because I came to the business older, so I didn't come in so thirsty and so. I was like, no, I'm very much. I got betrayed. I was like, nope, I don't want to do that. So for me, I have done that. So, but I know for other people, it's I don't know, but I have to respect your time because it went by so fast. It's been an hour and a half already, and so he actually has a job in the morning to go to. We do this every time. I have 10,000 more things we're going to talk about. But we'll be back next month. We do this once monthly. We were doing it towards the end of the month, which is kind of nice, kind of ending up the month this way. So we're going to pick another date after we get off of here. But everybody, please thank Jerry Carol for being on the show. Everybody in the chat room. Jared, any last words? I'm sorry, I was looking at the time going.
No, I'm just I'm grateful every time to have this opportunity to chat with you and share my insights and what I think I hope is a little bit of wisdom, but also be humbled by just being in this conversation and getting an opportunity to influence the conversation. And I think these types of conversations, however small they are and however infrequent and however small the audience is, we need more of this true dialogue. I don't think we often disagree, but it never feels contentious. It never feels confrontational. It just feels like, hey, we can, I can say something, you can say the complete opposite, and it's not a thing for either of us. And I think there's an art to that people either have never learned, or if they have, they don't value it enough to fight for it. And I think we need more of that. It's kind of a meta conversation. If we can start doing that more, then maybe some of the things we were talking about can progress a little more quickly.
And I will just end with everything he says. I agree with it. Also, there are a lot of things we all have in common. We need to get back to that. Most Americans want 4 or 5 things, and it's all the same 4 or 5 things. It really is. So think about what the 4 or 5 things are yourselves, but many of us want the same 4 or 5 things, and that's literally what it is. And also, we need to get rid of fear of what we don't know. We need to get rid of that. So, I'm James Lott Jr. Jared Karol is a white guy confronting racism. He's on social media at that. There's a book out at that, jaredkarol.com, correct?
That is right. Yep.
Go there. And it's, for you guys listening, it's JaredKarol. I know his name is all these different, no, he's different spellings. He has different spellings. My name is normal, James Lott Jr. Follow me where all James Lott Jr.'s are at James Lott Jr., of course. Like I said, we do this monthly. You can check out our previous episodes, just extra connections. We're on Facebook. We also go back on if you're listening, or we have a playlist here on YouTube, which is JLJ Media. Make sure you subscribe to it. You can actually hear our conversations. We have God at this point, 8 or 9 at this point. And this one, just go back in. I'm actually going to look how many we have, but it's a bunch. We have a bunch of these. We talk about this, and I think as long as we're willing to do this, as long as I have a channel, I would keep talking about it. I can't see us, and racism's not going to end tomorrow. I wish it would. We'd be out of jobs, but I wish it would. But that's, what I mean. But it's like, it's not going to. So he and I will be here.
We'll be here,
and I'll be a year older next time you see me. He might be, depending on how we do it. We're doing that, so that's going to be happening too. But I'll still be black. It's fine. And this shirt is Black Queer History. Look it up. These 5 locations are where LA Black Queer History started. Cooper's, let's see, I can say everything. Cooper's Donuts, Black Cats, The Patch, Biltmore, and let's see,
Invasion.
Thank you. That is Black Queer History and regular queer history too in Los Angeles. So you can look that up, folks. People are asking my shirt, so that's what my shirt says. I'm always wearing t-shirts with something on them. We thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time.